I'm Lauren, 29, and I never thought my own parents would tell me I wasn't welcome at my brother's wedding. Lauren, honey, with your appearance, it's better if you're not there, Mom said, Dad nodding behind her. Their words carved something out of me that day, something I wasn't sure I could ever get back. But sometimes, rejection becomes your greatest redirection. Before I tell you how I turned this heartbreaking rejection into the most defining moment of my life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever felt like the black sheep of your family, hit subscribe. My story might just give you the courage you need. Growing up in Riverdale, Minnesota, population 8,742, wasn't easy for someone who never quite fit the mold. Our town was the kind where everyone knew everyone's business, where tradition was sacred, and where stepping outside the lines meant becoming the subject of grocery store whispers. My parents, Margaret and Robert Anderson, were pillars of this community. Dad owned the most successful insurance agency in town, and Mom was the elementary school principal. They were respected, admired, and utterly conventional. Then there were their children, Ryan and me. Ryan, my brother, 2 years younger than me but somehow always miles ahead in our parents' eyes. From the moment he picked up a baseball at age 4 and threw it with surprising accuracy, he was destined for greatness, at least according to our parents. His room gradually filled with trophies: baseball, basketball, football, track. Each trophy earned a new family photo, prominently displayed in our living room. Each achievement announced at church and family gatherings. Ryan Anderson, the golden child. I still remember my 8th grade art show. I'd spent months working on a series of watercolor landscapes that my teacher, Ms. Winters, said showed extraordinary promise. The show was scheduled for 6 in the evening on a Tuesday. Mom had promised they'd be there. We wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetie, she'd said that morning, ruffling my hair. 6 o'clock came and went. 6:30. 7. By 7:30, when parents were collecting their children and their artwork, I stood alone next to my blue ribbon painting of Lake Superior at sunrise. Ms. Winters eventually drove me home. They had forgotten. Ryan had an unexpected baseball practice, and it simply hadn't occurred to them to split up, one parent for each child. That night, I carefully rolled up my painting and slid it under my bed. I never showed it to them, and they never asked to see it. This pattern repeated throughout high school. My acceptance into the Regional Young Artists program? Acknowledged with distracted nods as they rushed to Ryan's championship game. My scholarship to the Art Institute of Chicago? That's nice, honey, but are you sure that's practical? Meanwhile, Ryan's athletic scholarship to the University of Minnesota was celebrated with a party that included half the town. Don't misunderstand, I loved my brother. Ryan was kind, funny, and never intentionally overshadowed me. He would often sneak into my shows when he could, giving me a thumbs up from the back row. It wasn't his fault our parents had such a clear favorite. We had an unspoken understanding: he would excel in the spotlight, and I would find my way in the shadows. After college, I stayed in Chicago, building a career as a freelance graphic designer. My work was featured in industry magazines. I designed campaigns for notable brands. I created a life that felt authentic to me, complete with an industrial loft apartment that doubled as my studio, a small circle of artistic friends, and hair that changed color with my moods, currently a vibrant teal that faded to lavender at the tips. But 3 months ago, my biggest client relocated, taking my most reliable income with them. Faced with Chicago's relentless rent prices, I made the difficult decision to temporarily move back to Riverdale, storing most of my belongings and setting up a small workspace in my childhood bedroom. Just until I land another major client, I told myself. 3 months, tops. Moving back meant confronting the reality that nothing had changed. My parents still saw my career as a hobby, my appearance as a phase, and my life choices as disappointing. Meanwhile, Ryan had followed the expected path: college, then joining Dad's insurance agency, buying a house 4 blocks from our parents. Then there was Melissa, Ryan's fiancée. Melissa Palmer was the human embodiment of a Hallmark movie heroine: kindergarten teacher, church choir member, volunteer at the animal shelter, with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and a smile that never faltered. She called my parents mom and dad within weeks of dating Ryan, baked cookies for every occasion, and fit so seamlessly into our family that sometimes it felt like she'd been there all along, while I remained perpetually out of place. I tried, though. I really did. When I moved back, I made efforts to connect with my parents. I cooked dinner once a week, asked about their lives, showed them my recent design projects. I even toned down my appearance for family gatherings, switching my nose ring for a stud, covering my arm tattoos with long sleeves despite the summer heat. The approval I sought remained elusive, materializing only in conditional forms: "You look so nice without that thing in your nose," or "If only you applied your artistic talents to something more respectable, like Melissa's watercolor hobby." Each comment reinforced what I'd always known: I was tolerated, not celebrated. Accepted with conditions, not embraced for who I was. Still, family was family, and I kept showing up, hoping that someday, somehow, they might see me, really see me, and find something worth loving without reservation. The dinner where Ryan announced his engagement to Melissa was held at Riverdale's only upscale restaurant, the Lakeside Grill. I had just landed a small but exciting contract with an up-and-coming sustainable fashion brand, and I mentioned it briefly as we settled into our booth. "That's nice, dear," Mom said, glancing at her watch. "Is everyone ready to order?" Ryan said he has news. The excitement on my brother's face was impossible to miss, and I immediately knew what was coming. When the champagne arrived, ordered by Dad before we even sat down, Ryan took Melissa's hand and announced, "We're engaged." The restaurant seemed to erupt around us. Mom cried happy tears, Dad clapped Ryan on the back so hard it echoed, and even our server got pulled into the celebration, taking photos with Mom's phone. I hugged Melissa, genuinely happy for her, and gave my brother a tight embrace. "I'm so happy for you guys," I said, meaning every word. Ryan deserved happiness. Melissa was kind, if a bit conventional. They made sense together. "Thank you, Lauren," Melissa said, her diamond ring catching the light as she reached for my hand. "Actually, we were hoping you might help with some of the design elements, invitations, programs, that sort of thing. You're so talented." For a moment, I felt a warm glow of inclusion. Of being valued for who I was, not who they wished I would be. "Oh, well," Mom interjected, "we were thinking of using Aunt Judy's daughter-in-law. She did your cousin Beth's wedding materials, and they were just darling. So traditional and elegant." The warm glow flickered out. Ryan shot me an apologetic look, but didn't contradict her. Over the next few weeks, wedding planning consumed every family interaction. Mom and Melissa created a wedding Pinterest board with hundreds of pins, all featuring the same aesthetic: rustic elegance, blush pink and navy blue, mason jars and twinkle lights. Traditional, safe, and utterly unlike anything I would design. Still, I offered to help where I could. I suggested designing custom cocktail napkins with Ryan and Melissa's love story illustrated in a simple, elegant style. "Oh, I don't know," Mom hesitated. "We were thinking of something more conventional." That word again. Conventional. The opposite of everything I was. The breaking point came during a shopping trip with Mom and Melissa to look at bridesmaid dresses. I wasn't officially part of the bridal party, those spots were reserved for Melissa's sisters and childhood friends, but Mom insisted I come along for the experience. As Melissa tried on different dresses in the bridal boutique, I sat on a plush velvet couch next to Mom and her friend Susan, who had joined us for the occasion. "Have you thought about what Lauren will wear?" Susan asked my mother in what she probably thought was a whisper. Mom sighed. "We're hoping she'll dress appropriately. It's going to be at the church, after all. Could she cover the tattoos? And maybe do something about the hair? We've suggested it several times. But you know Lauren always has to make a statement." I sat frozen, pretending to be absorbed in a bridal magazine while my chest tightened painfully. "It's just such a shame," Susan continued. "In all the family photos, it's not like you can Photoshop that out. And of course she'll be coming alone, Mom added. 29 and not even dating anyone. It's embarrassing. I excused myself to the bathroom, where I leaned against the marble counter and focused on breathing. Just breathe, Lauren. This isn't new. You know who they are. You know who you are. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. In the weeks that followed, I tried harder than ever to fit in. I purchased a conservative navy dress for the wedding that covered my tattoos. I researched temporary hair dyes that would return my vibrant locks to their natural brown. I even practiced neutral conversation topics that wouldn't raise eyebrows at the rehearsal dinner. The anxiety built as the wedding approached. I had nightmares about showing up at the church and causing a scene just by existing. In one particularly vivid dream, I walked down the aisle instead of Melissa, each step revealing more of my tattoos until I was covered in them, my parents' faces contorted in horror as the church emptied around us. I should have known what was coming. All the signs were there. But somehow, when the moment arrived, it still blindsided me completely. 3 weeks before the wedding, my parents asked me to come over for dinner. Just us, Mom said over the phone. We need to discuss something important. I arrived at their Tudor-style home, the same one I'd grown up in, with a sense of unease. The dining room table was set for 3, but no one was sitting. Instead, my parents were waiting in the living room, perched awkwardly on the edge of the sofa like visitors in their own home. Lauren, honey, have a seat, Mom said, patting the armchair across from them. Dad cleared his throat but said nothing, his eyes fixed somewhere over my left shoulder. I recognized his expression, the same one he wore when delivering bad news to clients about rejected insurance claims. Is everything okay? I asked, settling into the chair. Is the wedding off or something? No, Mom assured me quickly. The wedding is perfect. Everything's on track. She exchanged a look with Dad, who nodded almost imperceptibly. That's actually what we wanted to talk to you about. She reached for the glass of water on the coffee table, took a small sip, and set it down with deliberate precision. We've been thinking, and we believe it might be best if you didn't attend the ceremony. The words hung in the air between us. I waited for more, for clarification, for a punchline, for anything that would make those words make sense. I'm sorry, what? I finally managed. Mom leaned forward, her voice taking on the gentle tone she used when explaining difficult concepts to her elementary school students. Sweetheart, this wedding is very important to Ryan and Melissa. And to us. The Palmers are a very respected family in this town. The ceremony will be at First Lutheran, with Pastor Mitchell officiating. And? I prompted, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake beginning inside me. And your alternative appearance might be a distraction. Your hair, your tattoos. She gestured vaguely at all of me. I bought a conservative dress, I said. I was going to dye my hair brown. I've been planning to cover everything up. The desperation in my voice made me wince. Dad finally spoke, his voice gruff. It's not just how you look, Lauren. It's the attention you draw. People will be focusing on you instead of the bride and groom. What people, Dad? Who exactly will be so scandalized by my existence that it ruins Ryan's wedding? The Palmers are very traditional, Mom explained. Melissa's father is on the church council. Her grandfather was a pastor. So I'm an embarrassment, I said flatly. Mom flinched at the word. We didn't say that. You didn't have to. The silence stretched between us, taut and terrible. We thought, Mom finally continued, that you could use the day to reflect on your life choices. Maybe this is an opportunity to consider the path you've taken. My laugh came out harsh and strange. You want me to spend my brother's wedding day contemplating how I've disappointed you by not being Melissa? That's not what we're saying, Dad interjected, but his protest rang hollow. Does Ryan know about this? I asked. Their exchanged glance told me everything. We thought it would be easier coming from us, Mom said. He's under so much stress already with the wedding preparations. So my brother doesn't even know you're uninviting me from his wedding. The betrayal was multi-layered, each revelation more painful than the last. We're not uninviting you, Mom insisted. We just think it would be better if I wasn't there, I finished for her. If I didn't exist in family photos. If I didn't embarrass you in front of the whole town. I stood up, surprising myself with how steady I felt despite the hurricane inside me. You don't have to worry. I won't be there. I won't embarrass you, or distract from the perfect day, or make anyone uncomfortable with my existence. Lauren, please try to understand, Mom began, rising from the couch. I understand perfectly, I said, already moving toward the door. I've always understood. I just kept hoping I was wrong. The drive home was a blur of tears and streetlights, the 3 miles between their house and my rented apartment stretching into an endless journey. Somehow I made it back, fumbling with my keys at the door, then collapsing against it once I was safely inside. My apartment, a small one-bedroom above the town's bookstore, was filled with my artwork. Canvases stacked against walls, sketches pinned to a corkboard, digital prints waiting to be shipped to clients. My parents had never visited. If they had, would they have seen me differently? Would they have recognized the person I'd become, separate from the disappointment they'd assigned me? I curled up on my bed, still in my coat, and let the tears come. They flowed endlessly, years of accumulated hurt breaking through a dam I hadn't realized was so close to crumbling. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest, a burning in my throat, a hollowness spreading through my body until I felt like a shell of myself. Hours passed. The room darkened as night fell, but I couldn't summon the energy to turn on a light. Questions cycled through my mind on endless repeat. What was so wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough? Would I ever be enough for anyone? Somewhere in the darkness, exhaustion finally claimed me, pulling me into a fitful sleep haunted by dreams of standing outside church windows, watching a perfect family celebration that had no place for me. The days after my parents' devastating request blurred together in a haze of numbness. I called in sick to my remote design meetings. I left client emails unanswered. I silenced my phone after the third text from Amanda, my best friend from Chicago, asking if I was okay. My apartment became both sanctuary and prison. I alternated between sleeping for 12 hours straight and lying awake all night, staring at the ceiling. I subsisted on delivery pizza and cereal eaten straight from the box. The cheerful teal of my hair faded to a dull blue-gray, matching my mood perfectly. The worst part wasn't the sadness or even the anger, it was the shame. Shame that burrowed deep into my bones, whispering that my parents were right. That I was too much, too loud, too different. That my very existence was an inconvenience to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. On the 4th day of my self-imposed isolation, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, scissors in hand, contemplating cutting off my colorful hair. Maybe if I looked normal, they would love me. Maybe if I erased all the visible parts of myself that they disapproved of, I could earn a place at the table. The realization of what I was contemplating hit me like a physical blow. I dropped the scissors into the sink with a clatter and stared at my reflection, red-rimmed eyes, unwashed hair, hollow cheeks. "What are you doing, Lauren?" I whispered to the stranger in the mirror. I backed away and moved to the living room, where my artwork surrounded me. A large canvas leaned against the wall, a piece I'd been working on before the conversation with my parents. It depicted a woman emerging from a chrysalis, her body half-transformed, beautiful and terrifying in her metamorphosis. I'd always worked through my emotions with art, translating internal struggles into external expressions. Looking at that unfinished painting, something shifted inside me. A tiny spark of defiance ignited amidst the ashes of my self-worth. My phone rang, breaking the silence that had enveloped my apartment for days. I almost ignored it, but the name on the screen made me pause, Grandma Patricia. My father's mother, the family maverick who'd caused scandal in her own time by divorcing my grandfather in the 1970s and opening a bookstore when women in Riverdale were expected to be homemakers. I answered on the 4th ring. "Hello?" Lauren Elizabeth Anderson, her familiar voice crackled through the speaker. I've been trying to reach you for days. What's going on? Nothing, Grandma. I've just been busy with work. The lie tasted bitter. Nonsense. I may be old, but my intuition works just fine. Something's wrong. The concern in her voice cracked something open inside me. Before I could stop myself, I was telling her everything, the conversation with my parents, the wedding, the years of feeling like I didn't belong. They said it would be better if I wasn't there, I finished, voice breaking. Their own daughter. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, those fools. Despite everything, I laughed through my tears. Grandma. Well, they are. Margaret always was too concerned with appearances, and my son, well, Robert takes the path of least resistance. Always has. She sighed heavily. Lauren, listen to me. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone in the family. She proceeded to share how, when she'd decided to divorce my grandfather after 20 years of a loveless marriage, her own parents had refused to attend her second wedding to the man she truly loved. They said I was bringing shame to the family. That divorce was a sin. That I was selfish for choosing my happiness over tradition. What did you do? I asked, captivated by this family history I'd never heard. I married him anyway, in a small ceremony by the lake. It was the happiest day of my life, even without my family there. Her voice softened. But I won't lie to you, child. It hurt. It hurt terribly. There's no shame in feeling that pain. How did you get past it? By understanding that their rejection wasn't about me, it was about them. Their fears, their rigid thinking, their inability to imagine happiness outside the narrow boundaries they'd drawn. She paused. And by refusing to let their limitations become my own. As we talked, something began to unravel inside me, not in the devastating way of the past few days, but like a knot loosening, allowing me to breathe again. You are a marvel, Lauren, Grandma Patricia said firmly. Your creativity, your courage to live authentically, these aren't flaws to be hidden. They're gifts. Gifts that frightened people will never understand. By the time we hung up, tears were streaming down my face again, but these felt different. Cleansing rather than depleting. I looked around my apartment, at the evidence of my life and work, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of something that might have been pride. Grandma Patricia's words echoed in my mind, their rejection wasn't about me, it was about them. Could the same be true for me? Was my parents' rejection less about my failures and more about their own limitations? The thought didn't erase the pain, but it created a small distance from it, enough space to breathe, to think, to consider that perhaps I wasn't the one who needed to change. I reached for my sketchbook and began to draw, letting the emotions flow through my fingers onto the page. By morning, surrounded by dozens of sketches and with charcoal smudged across my face, I made a decision: I would not spend my brother's wedding day hiding in shame. I would not give my parents' rejection the power to define me. I would find another way to honor that day, one that honored myself as well. The morning after my conversation with Grandma Patricia, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. Sunlight streamed through curtains I'd actually opened, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I made coffee, real coffee, not just instant, and took a long, hot shower, washing away days of neglect. As I stood in front of my closet, wrapped in a towel, I caught sight of the navy dress I'd bought for the wedding. The sight of it no longer filled me with anxiety or shame. Instead, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I didn't need to wear this costume of acceptability. I didn't need to perform normalcy to be worthy of love. I reached for my phone and called Amanda, my best friend from Chicago. She lives? Amanda exclaimed when she answered. I was about to send a search party. Sorry for going AWOL, I said, settling onto my bed. It's been a week. Spill everything. Now. I told her the whole story, from the wedding planning to my parents' devastating request. Amanda's outrage on my behalf was both validating and oddly comforting. Those absolute monsters, she fumed. Who does that to their own child? My parents, apparently. So what are you going to do? Please tell me you're not actually skipping the wedding. I took a deep breath. Actually, I am. But not for the reasons they want me to. I'm listening. I could show up anyway, create a scene, make them uncomfortable. Or I could go along with their wishes, dye my hair, cover my tattoos, make myself small enough to be acceptable. I traced the outline of a lotus flower tattoo on my wrist, my first, gotten after graduation. But either way, I'd be letting them dictate my choices. I'd be centering my life around their approval or disapproval. So what's the alternative? I'm going to reclaim that day. Make it about something meaningful to me, not about their rejection. The plan was forming as I spoke it. I'm going to use that day to celebrate who I am, not mourn who they wish I was. Amanda was silent for a moment. That's actually kind of brilliant. What exactly are you thinking? I wasn't entirely sure yet, but ideas were beginning to crystallize. After hanging up with Amanda, I opened my laptop and began researching events happening in Riverdale on Ryan's wedding day. Most were typical small-town fare, a farmer's market, youth baseball games, a car wash fundraiser for the high school band. Then I saw it, community arts fundraiser, help save the old theater. The historic Majestic Theater, where I'd seen my first art film and realized there was a world beyond Riverdale, was in danger of being demolished. A local arts organization was hosting a fundraiser to purchase and renovate it as a community arts center. I clicked through to the event details and found the contact information for the organizer, Charlotte Weber. Without giving myself time to reconsider, I sent an email offering my professional design services for the event, free of charge. Charlotte's response came within the hour. We would be thrilled to have your help. Can you meet tomorrow to discuss? The next day, I met Charlotte at Riverdale's only coffee shop. She was nothing like I expected, in her 60s with short silver hair, multiple ear piercings, and a leather jacket covered in political pins. She'd moved to Riverdale 5 years ago from Minneapolis to care for her aging mother and had been fighting to inject some artistic life into the town ever since. This fundraiser is our last chance, she explained, spreading out poorly designed flyers on the table between us. The developer's deadline is next month. If we can't raise the down payment, the Majestic becomes a parking lot. I won't let that happen, I said with a conviction that surprised me. This wasn't just about finding something to do on the wedding day anymore. This was about preserving a piece of Riverdale that had once made me feel less alone. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into preparations for the fundraiser. I redesigned all their promotional materials, created an online donation platform, and reached out to my network of artist friends to donate pieces for the auction. Charlotte introduced me to her small but passionate group of volunteers, other misfits who'd found each other in this conventional town. In the evenings, I worked on a personal art project, a series exploring themes of belonging, rejection, and self-acceptance. I hadn't created personal work in months, too busy with client projects and too drained by family dynamics. Now, the ideas flowed freely, painful but cathartic. During this time, Ryan texted me twice. The first message was casual, haven't seen you around. Everything okay? I stared at those words for a long time, wondering if he knew what our parents had done. Did he agree with them? Was he relieved that the embarrassing sister wouldn't be ruining his perfect day? Or was he genuinely in the dark? I opted for simplicity, just busy with work. All good. Excited for your big day. His second text came 3 days later. Mom mentioned you might not make it to the wedding. Everything okay? So they'd told him I wasn't coming, but not that they'd asked me to stay away. Typical. I considered telling him the truth, but what would that accomplish? Create family drama before his wedding? Force him to choose sides? As hurt as I was, I couldn't do that to him. Don't worry about me, I texted back. Your day should be perfect. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb after that, focusing instead on the fundraiser and my art. The wedding was just days away now, and while the pain hadn't disappeared, it had transformed into something else, a driving force behind my creativity, a clarity about who I was and what mattered to me. The night before the wedding, I stood in my apartment surrounded by my finished art pieces, raw, honest explorations of family, identity, and belonging. I'd titled the series Uninvited, a reclamation of the word that had wounded me so deeply. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. Tomorrow would be hard, there was no denying that. But I had a plan, a purpose, and perhaps most importantly, a growing certainty that I wasn't the one who needed to change. The morning of Ryan's wedding dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect June days that seemed designed for outdoor celebrations and wedding photos. I woke early, my sleep restless with dreams I couldn't quite remember. For a moment, lying in bed watching sunlight filter through my curtains, the reality of the day hit me with full force. My brother was getting married, and I wouldn't be there. The ache was real, a physical sensation in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I allowed myself to feel it fully, to acknowledge the loss without trying to reason it away. Then I reached for my phone and opened Instagram. My feed was already filling with pre-wedding excitement. Ryan's groomsmen posting shots of their breakfast meetup. My cousin sharing a selfie in hair rollers with the caption "Ready for the Anderson-Palmer wedding." My mother's friend Susan documenting the flower arrangements being delivered to the church. I set the phone down and took a deep breath. This was the hard part, the moment when I could have spiraled into self-pity or regret. Instead, I got out of bed and walked to the full-length mirror on my closet door. Today is not about what you've lost, I told my reflection. It's about what you're choosing. I dressed with intention, selecting pieces that reflected who I truly was, a vintage band t-shirt under a paint-splattered denim jacket I'd customized myself, my favorite black jeans, and boots covered in small, hand-drawn designs. I freshened the color in my hair, deepening the teal and adding strands of bright purple. I put on all my jewelry, the nose ring I'd switched to a stud for family gatherings, the multiple earrings my mother called excessive, the delicate tattoo-inspired necklace Amanda had given me for my last birthday. This was me, unapologetically, authentically me. And today, that was enough. The community center where the arts fundraiser was being held was only a mile from my apartment. I loaded my car with the artwork I'd selected to donate, carefully wrapped in bubble wrap and old sheets. As I drove, I deliberately took a route that avoided passing the church where, in just a few hours, my brother would be getting married without me. Charlotte was already at the community center when I arrived, directing volunteers with cheerful efficiency. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Lauren. You're here early." "Nowhere else I'd rather be," I said, surprised to find I meant it. The next few hours passed in a flurry of activity. I helped set up display easels for the artwork, arranged the refreshment table, and put the finishing touches on the digital presentation I'd created showcasing the Majestic Theater's history and potential future. People began arriving around 11, a trickle at first, then a steady stream that surpassed our expectations. "I can't believe the turnout," Charlotte whispered to me as we surveyed the crowded room. "Your promotional materials made all the difference." I smiled, watching as people examined the artwork, placed bids in the silent auction, and clustered around the scale model of the proposed arts center. There was an energy in the room, a sense of community and purpose that felt almost electric. Around 1 o'clock, the time the wedding ceremony would be starting, a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair approached the table where my artwork was displayed. "Are you the artist?" she asked, studying a piece titled Chrysalis that showed a figure emerging from a confined space, reaching toward light. "I am," I confirmed. "I'm Catherine Liu. I own the River Gallery in Minneapolis." She extended her hand. "Your work is extraordinary. So raw and honest. Do you have more pieces like these?" My heart raced as I shook her hand. "Yes, this is part of a series I've been working on. I'd love to see the rest. We're planning a show called Hidden Voices this fall, emerging artists exploring themes of identity and transformation. Your work would be perfect." I stood speechless, unable to process what was happening. Catherine Liu was offering me a gallery showing, a real gallery, not just the coffee shop displays I'd managed to secure in Chicago. I know talent when I see it, Catherine continued, mistaking my silence for hesitation. And you, Lauren Anderson, have something special to say. Hearing my name, my family name. In this context, associated with praise rather than disappointment, jarred me out of my shock. I'd be honored, I finally managed. Thank you. We exchanged contact information, and Catherine moved on to examine other artwork. I remained rooted to the spot, a strange lightness spreading through me. Today was supposed to be a day of loss and exclusion. Instead, it was becoming a day of opportunity and recognition. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself fully present in a way I hadn't expected. I spoke with community members passionate about preserving the theater. I connected with other artists who, like me, had felt out of place in our small town. I even did an impromptu interview with the local newspaper about why the arts matter in communities like Riverdale. Around 4 o'clock, when the wedding reception would be starting, Charlotte clinked a glass to get everyone's attention. Thanks to all of you, we've raised over $15,000 today towards saving the Majestic. The room erupted in cheers. And special thanks to Lauren Anderson, whose design work and artistic contributions made this event such a success. The applause that followed was nothing like the polite acknowledgement I'd received at family gatherings. This was genuine appreciation for exactly who I was and what I could contribute. As the day wound down and volunteers began cleaning up, I checked my phone for the first time in hours. There were several texts from Amanda asking how I was doing, one from Grandma Patricia sending love, and, surprisingly, one from Ryan sent just 30 minutes ago, "Missed you today, sis." Those 4 simple words brought tears to my eyes, not the devastating tears of rejection I'd cried days earlier, but something softer, more complex. I still felt the absence, the hurt of what should have been. But alongside it was a growing certainty that I'd spent the day exactly where I needed to be. I texted back, "Missed you too. Congratulations, Ryan. I love you." Then I posted a single photo to Instagram, not of me, but of the community center filled with people, the Save the Majestic banner prominent in the background. The caption read simply, "Found my people today." Within minutes, likes and comments began flowing in, including one from Catherine Liu, "Looking forward to showcasing your powerful work this fall. The art world needs voices like yours." As I drove home that evening, with the setting sun painting the sky in colors that reminded me of my first watercolor set, I realized something profound: rejection had become redirection. My parents' inability to accept me had pushed me toward people who could, people who valued exactly the parts of me that my family had deemed unacceptable. For the first time in my life, I felt not just okay with who I was, but proud. Unapologetically, defiantly proud. 3 days after the wedding, my phone lit up with a text from Ryan, "Coffee tomorrow? Just us." We met at Beans and Books, the cafe below my apartment. Ryan arrived in his insurance agency suit, looking simultaneously more grown-up than I'd ever seen him and oddly vulnerable. The faint shadows under his eyes suggested the post-wedding exhaustion hadn't quite worn off. "So," he said after we'd gotten our drinks and settled at a corner table, "you want to tell me why you weren't at my wedding?" I stared into my latte, gathering courage. "Did Mom and Dad tell you they asked me not to come?" His sharp intake of breath answered before his words did. "What? No. They said you had decided not to attend. Something about an important work event." I nodded slowly. There was an event. But it wasn't the reason I didn't come. I took a deep breath and met his eyes. 3 weeks before the wedding, Mom and Dad sat me down and told me it would be better if I wasn't there. That my appearance would be a distraction. That I should use the day to reflect on my life choices. Ryan's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, anger, then a deep sadness. "Lauren, I had no idea. I swear, if I'd known." "What would you have done, Ryan? Confronted them? Created a family crisis right before your wedding?" I shook my head. "That's exactly why I didn't tell you." But it was my wedding. My decision who should be there. Was it, though? How many decisions about that wedding were actually yours and Melissa's, versus Mom and Dad's and the Palmers? He was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in slow circles. Not many, he finally admitted. It was easier to go along with what everyone wanted. I get it, I said, and I did. Ryan had always been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed rough edges and kept everyone happy. I'm not angry with you. You should be. He looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I should have stood up for you. I should have noticed what was happening. Maybe, I conceded. But it's done now. And honestly, Ryan, the day turned out to be pretty amazing for me. I told him about the fundraiser, about Catherine Liu and the gallery opportunity, about finding a community that appreciated me exactly as I was. His smile was genuine, if tinged with regret. I'm happy for you, Lore. Really. But I'm still furious with them. What will you do? I don't know yet. But something. This isn't okay. We finished our coffee, talking about his honeymoon and my art, carefully avoiding further discussion of our parents. As we hugged goodbye outside the cafe, he held on a little longer than usual. I'm sorry, he whispered. I love you, sis. I love you too, I said, and meant it. A week later, the inevitable happened. My mother called, her voice overly bright. Lauren, honey. We haven't heard from you since before the wedding. We should get together for dinner soon. Ryan and Melissa are back from their honeymoon, and we're thinking of having a small family gathering this weekend. The casual way she spoke, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't broken my heart just weeks ago, was almost surreal. Actually, Mom, I'm pretty busy these days. Too busy for family dinner? What could possibly be more important? The old Lauren would have apologized, would have rearranged her schedule to accommodate, would have swallowed the hurt and shown up with a smile. The new Lauren took a deep breath and said, My life, Mom. My work. My art. The things you've never considered important. The silence on the other end was deafening. Ryan told you he talked to me, didn't he? I continued. That's why you're calling. Not because you miss me or want to see me, but because you're worried about what I told him. Lauren, that's not fair. We were just trying to make the wedding day special for everyone. By excluding your daughter? The words came out sharper than I intended, years of accumulated hurt behind them. We never said we didn't want you there. We just thought. You thought I was an embarrassment, I finished for her. You've always thought that. The difference is, now I know I don't have to accept that judgment. After a long pause, my mother's voice came back smaller than before. What do you want from us, Lauren? It was a question I'd never expected her to ask, and one I needed to answer carefully. I want you to see me, Mom. Really see me. Not who you wish I was, but who I actually am. I want you to respect my choices even when they're different from yours. I want you to be proud of me for my accomplishments, not despite them. I don't know if I can do that, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I know, I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. That's why I'm setting some boundaries. I'm not coming to family dinners for a while. I need time and space to build a life that makes me happy, without constantly seeking approval I'm never going to get. The conversation ended soon after, unresolved but honest in a way our family rarely was. In the days that followed, my father called once, left an awkward voicemail about moving forward as a family, then didn't call again. 6 months later, my artwork was featured in Catherine Liu's Hidden Voices exhibition at the River Gallery in Minneapolis. The centerpiece was my uninvited series, now expanded and refined, a powerful visual narrative of rejection, self-discovery, and ultimate triumph. On opening night, I stood in the gallery surrounded by art lovers examining my work, discussing themes of identity and belonging. The validation was overwhelming, not because I needed external approval, but because I'd managed to transform pain into something beautiful and meaningful. Lauren, a familiar voice called out. I turned to see Ryan and Melissa making their way through the crowd, followed by, to my complete shock, Grandma Patricia leaning on her cane. Surprise! Ryan grinned, hugging me tightly. We wouldn't miss this for the world. How did you get Grandma here? I asked, embracing my grandmother carefully. I told her I'd drive, Ryan said. And Melissa packed snacks. I'm so proud of you, child, Grandma Patricia said, looking around at my artwork with tears in her eyes. You turned pain into power. Not everyone can do that. As the evening progressed, I introduced them to Catherine, to Charlotte, who'd driven in from Riverdale, and to the artistic community that had embraced me so fully. Ryan seemed genuinely interested, asking questions about my process and technique that he'd never asked before. Near the end of the night, as I was saying goodbye to some gallery patrons, I looked up to see two more unexpected figures hesitating at the entrance, my parents. They looked out of place among the artistic crowd, my father uncomfortable in his suit, my mother clutching her purse like a lifeline. When they spotted me, they moved forward with visible uncertainty. Lauren, my mother said. Your work it's very powerful. Thank you, I replied, not quite sure what else to say. Ryan insisted we come, my father explained, his eyes not quite meeting mine. Said we needed to see what you've accomplished. The awkward silence that followed was broken by Catherine approaching with a reporter from a local arts magazine. Lauren, they'd like to interview you about your inspiration for the Uninvited series. I excused myself, grateful for the interruption. The interview lasted nearly 20 minutes, during which I spoke honestly about the family rejection that had sparked the series and the journey of self-acceptance that followed. When I finished, I turned to find my parents still standing nearby, having heard every word. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, her mascara slightly smudged. We didn't know, she said quietly. We didn't understand how much we hurt you. I tried to tell you, I said. 4 years. We weren't listening, my father admitted. Maybe we didn't want to hear it. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received from them. And for now, it was enough, a starting point, not an ending. In the months that followed, things changed slowly. My parents made awkward but genuine efforts to understand my world. They came to another gallery showing. My mother actually asked questions about my creative process. My father mentioned a client whose son was a tattoo artist. Small steps, imperfect and halting, but steps nonetheless. I maintained my boundaries, joining family gatherings on my own terms, leaving when the old patterns emerged. Sometimes it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I no longer measured my worth by their approval or disapproval. The most significant change wasn't in my relationship with my parents, it was in my relationship with myself. The woman who had once considered cutting off her colorful hair to please others now made choices based solely on what felt authentic and true. The artist who had hidden her work now showcased it proudly. The daughter who had spent years seeking approval now understood that some gifts can only come from within. 1 year after the wedding that I didn't attend, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a framed photo of 13-year-old me standing proudly next to my blue ribbon watercolor at that long-ago art show. Attached was a note in my mother's handwriting, "We found this in the attic. You've always been talented. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner." I hung the photo in my studio, not as a symbol of forgiveness or reconciliation, but as a reminder of how far I'd come and how much I'd overcome. My journey wasn't about proving my worth to others anymore. It was about embracing the truth I'd finally learned: rejection often leads to redirection, and sometimes, that redirection leads exactly where you're meant to be. Have you ever experienced rejection that ultimately led to something better? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey from family outcast to finding my authentic self resonated with you, please hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are enough exactly as they are. Thank you for being part of my healing journey, and remember, sometimes not being invited to the table means you're meant to build your own.